what the U.S. does with regard to international students and immigration policy also affects other countries, of course, since there's a competition for the best and brightest international students around the world. International students, as many of you know, they play a very significant role in higher education in the United States. They contribute $45 billion to the U.S. economy every year. There are 1 million foreign students in the U.S. in any given year. They comprise about 5% of total students in higher education and contribute about 10% of total tuition revenue. And there are many universities who depend heavily on international students. So there's great interest out there in terms of seeing how the Biden administration, what impact the Biden administration will have on international students in the United States. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is a flattening out of international student enrollment in the United States. And certainly the US market share has been declining over the last 20 years. This is I think a topic of interest for many. And here, I'm very pleased to have Paul Keller. He's Director of International Enrollment at Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT. We're very pleased to have him as our first fireside chat guest. RIT has over 2,400 international students on its Rochester campus from over 100 countries. That represents more than 10% of its student body. And maybe before we could begin, Paul, if you could give a quick summary of RIT and the mandate you have at RIT with regard to international student recruiting, that'd be great, including a makeup of your team. But great to have you, Paul, and look forward to chatting.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. This should be a really enjoyable discussion. It's certainly a topic with no shortage of opinions out there. And, I'm really here both as an ambassador from Rochester Institute of Technology, but also kind of from higher education in the United States. And it's certainly been a confusing 10 months or so in kind of world events. And obviously, I'm sure there's going to be some questions from you on COVID-19. But in terms of Rochester Institute of Technology, we are in Rochester, New York. We're traditionally known as a STEM school, but we're really much more than that. We have a huge focus on creativity and kind of entrepreneurship and kind of thinking differently, I think is one of the things that really underlies a lot of what happens on campus. One thing I will point out is, along with, you mentioned that we have about 2,400 international students from over 100 countries. We also have global campuses on different continents. We actually have a campus in Croatia, Kosovo, Dubai, and in China. So we're really, our reach is really wide. But if there is kind of one thread that goes through all of our programs, whether that's, glass blowing or animation or political science or kind of the traditional STEM degrees and mechanical engineering, our business programs, I really think one of the things that's underlying for us is a sense of creativity and then also a sense of working outcomes. We have one of the top OPT, CPT programs in the world. And if you're not familiar with those initials for the participants on this call, don't worry about it. We'll probably get to it later. But what it means is getting working professional experiences for you while you're an undergraduate or while you're a graduate. That's one of the things that we're really known for is being a co-op school. So that's just a really kind of quick once over. But, in terms of my office, we really travel the world. We're looking for, cultural diversity on our campus. We think we're not looking for international students for their tuition dollars. We're really looking for them to make our campus a better place. And over the course of this podcast, I'm sure there were some questions that will be brought up, but we've had mixed messages coming from Washington and other places in terms of how welcome international students are, and we welcome international students. They're a huge part of our community, and one of the kind of the phrases that I've really latched onto these last few years is that I think all students, both American students and students from the rest of the world, need to have a high cultural IQ. Most of the people on this call are probably what they call Generation Z or Generation Z. And it's really being able to relate to people from a wide, diverse range of backgrounds is a really important skill if you want to have success in life, but really if you also just want to have a good life and a happy life. And as I look at myself as a white male, I'm kind of the dominant culture here in the United States. I'm a middle-aged white male. What we found is I'm always thinking of how to relate to people from a wide range of backgrounds. I read a lot of books on the topic and articles on the topic. But for me, what I found is the best way to understand with people from a different background is to just hang out with them. So literally just spend time with them in a kind of a social environment, or certainly a working environment. And that's what having international students on our campus does for our student body and our entire community, and even the Rochester community for that matter. So if you take nothing else from this podcast, one of those pieces of advice I have is, if you really want to become as culturally responsive and culturally sensitive as you can, spend time with other people from different backgrounds and whose views differ from you, and that's really the key to it. So that's kind of my once over on Rochester Institute of Technology, and I'll pass it back to you, Eric.
Okay, thanks. I think we obviously want to. I think we're all very interested to hear your points of view on how the Biden administration will impact international students and international student enrollments and recruiting. But I think before we start with that, and thank you for that introduction, it would be very interesting to just hear about how it's been to recruit international students. What's the environment been like in the last months since COVID-19 hit? What has been on the minds of students on campus? What have been in the minds of prospective students? I think that's of great interest to people, is just to hear your perspective on the last months.
Sure. And I'm certainly not a good predictor of the future. And the reason I'm smiling right now is, so my last day in the office was March 17th. At that point we went home. And I've been working from home for the most part. I'm in the office a couple of days a week. And so on March 17th, we had a contest in our office of when everything would be back to normal. And the decision I made was May 4th. So it shows that I'm not a great predictor of global pandemics and how long they get to be resolved. So the reason I mentioned that is I think a lot of people are kind of along with me in that we thought this would end sooner than it did. And so for the cycle of students who wanted to start in fall 2020, it was a really confusing couple of months. It was, am I going to be allowed to come over? Is it safe if I'm able to get a visa and go over there? Along with a lot of other questions. And what quickly, as the summer progressed, we could see is that our borders weren't open. The embassies were closed in many of our key markets, and so they simply couldn't get here. And so what we've done is we've created remote options for a lot of these students, being that they take classes online. We all know that there are certain programs that lend itself to online learning, and there's some programs that don't. And so we were able to capture, I'd say roughly 2/3 of what we would typically yield in a remote environment. We also have many of our students studying on our campuses in China and Dubai. And so that was something that was really helpful for us. But in terms of recruiting students, one of the things that I've discovered is I think it's really important to kind of lead with empathy. Whether you're an 18-year-old undergraduate applicant or a 22-year-old graduate applicant or a 40-year-old graduate applicant, we're all kind of, you're always still growing at some point. And to let them know, hey, I'm approaching 50, and this is something that I've never seen, and gosh, this must be really hard. And how can we kind of provide you with the best information that we can, so you can make the most informed and best decision for you. The enrollment management, admissions profession for institutions like Rochester Institute of Technology and others, it's hard for us because we don't want to kind of keep hounding you and say, are you going to deposit? Are you going to enroll? It's a really competitive industry. Yet with that, I found where we've had the most success is just kind of saying, we're here with you through this challenging time. And whether you make the decision to enroll at our school remotely and take online classes for a year, or you want to try to come, we'll help you get a visa. We've written dozens of letters to embassies to try to get emergency appointments for students, but to say that we're with you, but we want you to make the best decision for you, for your education and your family. And we want you to feel good about it. we don't want you to be buying a plane ticket and 3 days before getting on the plane saying, gosh, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. We want you to feel good about it. For most of our students, we have offered deferment, saying, you can come next year. We'll hold your scholarship amount for our programs that we're allowed to do it. But it's certainly been very tricky for us, and we know it's been even trickier for the applicants and the students involved.
Well, thanks for that. So I'm going to now that we've kind of covered COVID-19, it's now time to talk about the Biden administration and what impact that could have. And so I'm going to ask you, Paul, to kind of pull out a crystal ball and go out on a limb a little bit and make some predictions. I mean, what do you see? And I think I can tell you, I live in Norway. I've been there for almost 2 decades, and the amount of interest in the election, it was just unbelievable. I mean, there were just talk shows, coverage was just tremendous, and there was tremendous engagement in a country like Norway, where people were following this, minute to minute, hour to hour, as the votes were being counted. And I suspect there's a lot of interest, was a lot of interest in this election in many other places as well, not just Norway. And that's certainly what I've heard. Anyway, I'm really interested to know what you think the impact will be on international student enrollment, on international student recruiting. What specific measures do you think the Biden administration will take to make the U.S. An even more attractive place for international students going forward?
Sure. Well, it's one of the things is I'm a statistics guy. I'm a numbers guy a lot of the times, and one of the things that I'll say is from 1950 on, every single year over year, international students in our country increased. Then it roughly doubled from 2005 to 2015. I mean, that's just amazing when you think about it. And then in 2016, it hit a peak, and that's the first time it went down. There's no one reason, but I feel a very significant part of that was the change in Washington and Donald Trump becoming president. And he's obviously been a very polarizing figure in our country, and it's something we've never really seen the likes of. And there's some people who supported him a great deal, and there's some people who don't support him. But the reality is approximately 71 million people in this country cast their vote for him. What I will say is there's been a fairly unified voice across higher education that didn't support. I don't want to say didn't support Donald Trump, but didn't support some of the policies that affected international students. And I'm really proud at our university, our president, David Munson, along with several other university presidents, signed a letter to Congress, essentially saying, making student visas so difficult right now is really not in line with our ethos and what we believe here at RIT. So that was something that made me really happy. What we're hearing here is a lot of ways similar to Norway. We know that change is coming. One of the things is, things do take time. And so I don't think it's going to be a situation where, inauguration's on January 20th, and then just we wake up the next day and everything's different. One of the phrases that in America, we love our phrases, and one of the phrases that gets used way too much is a perfect storm. But this really has been a perfect storm with both politics and COVID-19. That's really been hard on international students. But I do, we already know there's going to be a welcoming voice coming from Washington. Biden has said a few, things about education already, and the impact that he sees it has. As you said in your opening, his wife is a professor, so I think that will have some, a micro impact on it. But I think he sees that really, yes, higher education is an industry. It's one of our largest exports that we offer, but it also adds so much more. Like you said, our vice president, she met her husband here while studying in the U.S. And so sure, our international students add to RIT, to our bottom line, and to our tuition revenues, but what they add in terms of their intellectual prowess and what they bring to our how they make our campus more culturally diverse places. That's what we're really after. And really, we are hoping better times are ahead with the new administration.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is kind of what I would have expected, and certainly living in a place like Norway, the dynamics, I think in terms of the US's perception of being a more welcoming place, that definitely is higher, I think, with Biden. But do you see anything specific in terms of specific measures that the administration could take? I mean, with regard to CPT or OPT or visa requirements, maybe things around immigration policy and enabling students to, once they get a PhD, for example, able to stay longer in the country. I mean, what are any sort of predictions on that front?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of CPT and OPT and STEM extensions, we're going to see an easing of it. Before COVID-19, there were measures taken in Washington to provide barriers, and this is a huge game changer for RIT. I mean, if you can believe it, if you take CPT per capita, like taking the number of students staying on after graduation, and you divide it by the size of the student body, RIT would be amongst the top in the country. There's universities that have more of us, but they have enrollments, 3 times, 4 times our size. As I said earlier, working outcomes is amongst the best things RIT does. And what we know is that's why students are choosing us. We do a lot of surveying, and one of our recent surveys said, amongst the top 3 reasons that students chose RIT was to get working experiences in the United States. That was listed in the top 3 of 70% of our students. Something that's also very satisfying is that when we've interviewed graduates, they're also saying by a wide margin that was the benefit they experienced. So it's very gratifying to know they're saying that's why they came to a school like RIT. And then after the fact, they're saying that that's what we were good at. So we have a long track record of not only getting students the working permissions to do that, but also getting them significant placements. Our graduating class of 2018, 77% of international students had worked while they're at RIT. And so that puts international students in a really unique position, because if they come to a good co-op school like RIT, what they'll be able to say is, not only did they study in the United States, but they also worked in the United States. And so kind of our inside joke is that when you graduate from RIT, you leave with 2 pieces of paper, one being a diploma and the other being a resume. So we see that it's going to really kind of get back to normal, kind of get back to where we were in 2016. What's less difficult to measure is the impact of just not having xenophobic messages coming through, the Twitter account of our president. We're expecting a much more welcoming, a much more articulate message to international students, starting on January 20th.
Are you, I'm just kind of curious, because I guess there is, I think let's be frank about it, there is a competition around the world for the best and the brightest international students. We know that the UK has been very proactive. We know that Canada is a very attractive location as well. Australia is also a very attractive location. I mean, what are you seeing in those markets relative to the US? Just curious, as you observe other markets.
No, the growth in Australia is made, it's huge, it's huge. And, I spend a good deal of my time working with education consultants and agencies around the world. It really doesn't matter the region of the world, whether it's, the Pacific Rim or the Middle East or Europe or, Latin America. I mean, it's, to a person, American education is not as sought after as it was 4 years ago. It's not a complete cause and effect, but that the numbers have gone down. Australia has become a very popular destination, particularly for undergraduates. And it's because, they're doing a really kind of thoughtful, articulate messaging as to what's good about Australia and why it's a place that they should consider. It's a very welcoming message. It's at a lower price point. There's some exceptional universities down there. I would say As you look through a lot of it, it feels like a lot of their marketing has been in opposition to what is happening in the US right now, to being a place where they can feel welcomed. They've really eased restrictions. It's a lot easier to get a student visa to go study in Australia than it is in the US. And it's a lot less expensive. We're seeing people, with a wide range of experiences. And for the sake of full disclosure, I too met my wife while she was on CPT from Canada many years ago. And Canada is also becoming a lot more of a popular destination. And, people don't say it to us kind of this bluntly, but, I think one of the messages has been, we're not sure if the US is worth all of the extra work right now that it's become in the last few years. So not everybody in higher education agrees, but I would say most of us are welcome to the change in Washington. With that said, it's not going to be night and day. I think anytime our students, they're part of our community, and our applicants, they're really customers. We're beyond 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I think people could say, well, it's a privilege to come to our university. Well, it is a privilege to come to our university. We're a wonderful place, but we also have to look at prospective students as our customers. And we haven't always been welcoming as we could be. And like any business, if you lose your customers, it takes time to earn back their trust and to get them back.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think it's obviously a new environment now with the Biden administration. I mean, so what I think if you look at the audience, folks listening in, we'll have folks representing universities. We have educators on the phone, but we also have students as well listening in, and also will be listening to the podcast later on. I mean, what's the pitch? I mean, what's the pitch for the U.S. Typically for an international student? Why should they study in the United States? What are the key bullet points that you go through with students when you're pitching the U.S. as a destination?
Well, what I would say is, the college campuses in the United States, regardless of the size, regardless of the mission of that specific institution, are amongst the most intentionally diverse communities in the world. And so, you can really go there. I mean, do your homework ahead of time and learn about the universities where you're applying to. But, they really are like really no other places in the world where you can go and you can see not only just a great diversity of backgrounds, and I don't mean just cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, economic backgrounds, socio-political backgrounds, you name it. But also just a great abundance and diversity of thought. And I don't think there's many places in the world where you can find that to the degree that you can find that on American campuses. So, what I'd really see is, particularly for undergraduate students, you have that chance really just once in your life to go abroad and to have this diversity of thought and to be exposed to that and really, to kind of help confirm and shape your beliefs further. And it's also a great way to learn a lot, obviously. I mean, you go to college to learn, but as you do that to, really kind of think about, who you want to be for the rest of your life, what you want to do for the rest of your life, and to be able to do that in a community that's not homogenous, where everybody's thinking the same thing and everybody's doing the same thing. And so that's, to me, that's really, the pitch for places like RIT. It really is American education as a whole. And like I said earlier, just to kind of reconfirm, in RIT, you can do all of those things and also get those top-notch work experiences while you're here.
No, that's helpful. Again, just going down the track with regard to sort of the thinking about it from an international student perspective, because we have also students on the line listening in. What would be some things that you would, what advice would you give international students today in terms as they consider the United States, and I guess specifically with RIT, what are the most important criteria that you look at when you're considering an international student? What are the key things that can differentiate one student from another?
Sure.
In an application process?
Yeah, so we're going through our application process right now. And I've done presentations on kind of the application process from the position. So in a typical year, I'll read a few hundred files from international students. And I would say one of the things is use your personal statement or essay to really kind of tie your story together, and really have a way to connect your application to what that school offers, and have the application tell the story of why they should admit you, and do that by the activities that you're disclosing on your application, things that you do outside of the classroom and how it ties to the program you're applying to, and then kind of use your essay as the glue to tie all of that together. I think definitely do some homework. One of the pieces of advice I give is at the undergraduate level, most students these days use the Common App, and I would suggest that you take your top 2 or 3 choices and apply on that school's online application, because that really shows that you're demonstrating a specific interest in that school. And do your homework. If you're writing an essay about how much you want to be a doctor, make sure that school has a medical school. And I say that with a chuckle, but you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at some of the applications you read. It's make sure that you can, clearly articulate a thought from beginning to end. People who are reviewing their applications, that's what they're looking for in the essay. They're not looking for the perfect topic. They're looking at, are you a clear and effective communicator? Because that's another skill that's unbelievably important for Generation Z. So, I think fit is the best word to use. Is how does your candidacy, how does your application tie in and fit? And then the other thing too, I would say is it's okay to request an interview as an international student. We have on our website, you can request a 30-minute appointment with one of our counselors. You can email me anytime, and we'll set up an interview with one of our international student admissions directors. And my email is really easy to remember. It's just Paul, Paul @mail.rit.edu. And feel free to connect with me, and we can set up a time. But it's okay to say, hey, I'm thinking about traveling to the other side of the world. It's a huge economic investment. And yeah, we certainly have a competitive admissions pool, but we also want people that we do admit and do enroll to make sure that they have all the information on hand that they can make to make sure that that's the best decision possible. It's a huge decision for you. So don't feel like that's out of line to kind of command that sort of kind of service from universities.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks very much. You may get a deluge of emails.
Yeah, I'll type it in the chat. I always say I have I don't have a fancy car, but I have a fancy email.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, you may get a deluge of emails.
And we welcome those.
That's terrific. Now I'm going to switch to some of the audience questions. So we've been getting some questions from the audience, and since we're on the track of students, and we'll come back, I also have some questions from more the university side, but these are questions that I think will be of interest. And I'm going to sort of ask you to pull out your crystal ball again, because there's some very specific questions about changes to the visa requirements. There's obviously some countries which are on the ban list. So there's just questions about what do you foresee in those areas with the new administration?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a wonderful example, which is Iran. We have a long history of having students from Iran. I believe we have about 16 students from Iran right now, and I actually just ran into a couple of them right before we shut down and chatted with them for a while. And they're, you talk about, I think, like, if you take Iran as an example of the perception of an average American, and then if you actually spent time with Iranians, such a warm, such a friendly culture, such a culture that values education. And so, right now, and this is just my opinion, but the relationships between the United States and Iran, it has two leaders who are, to use a phrase in English, are playing chicken, who are almost, kind of trying to one up each other on a global scale. And here at a place like RIT, we're stuck in the middle, and we value our we value students from over there. They've added a lot to our fabric, and this isn't just in 2020. This is going back a long ways, and so we really value having those students. We, in terms of the crystal ball, yes, I think especially once COVID-19, once there's a vaccine, and we don't know exactly when that date's going to be, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be easier to get visas. It's going to be easier to get STEM extensions. All of those things are going to become easier over the next 4 years. I can almost guarantee it, because the one thing I'll say is higher education. We have a good lobby in Washington. We're well represented in Washington, and that's been really clear, through these last couple of years. We see smoother sailing ahead for visas, and we do see, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing over the last couple of weeks more students get visas. It's still not back to normal, but just as just when I came in the office yesterday, we'd gotten a couple more from India. We'd gotten one from the UAE. We'd gotten one from Kuwait. So we're seeing a little more easing, and we expect that to increase in the coming months.
That's great. So what would be, again, just whipping out the crystal ball again, or keep the crystal ball out for you? I mean, what would you say your international student enrollment, what impact do you think, how much do you think your international student enrollment will increase going into 2021 with the new environment? Of course, COVID-19 has some impact, but if we make the assumption that that COVID-19 will get vaccinated and people will pull out of it and things will go back to normal, I mean, what would you anticipate in terms of percentage growth and international enrollment for you?
Sure. Well, I would, and I'm you said there's some other university folks on the call. I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think by fall 2022, we can hope to get back to about where fall 2019 is. And I think at that point, we at that point we can start thinking about growth again. I think we have to earn back the trust that we lost, through these last few years. We have to get our handle around COVID-19 and to have people feel really safe, and that they can come here, and we need to kind of redouble our efforts. And as we've taken our eye off the ball, like you said earlier, others have caught up. Canada's caught up, UK's caught up, Australia's caught up, and so we need to really make sure that we put our best foot forward in determining, to make that case for why should you come to the United States. Not only why should you come to the universities, but why should you come to the United States, and what is it the U.S. offers? I mean, one of the things that I think schools in other countries that support international students do, but American schools that I feel, just in my opinion, do better, is having that intentional, international students office. Having those arms of saying, we're not bringing you in and just saying, you're lucky to be here, act like you're American. No. That's it, the exact opposite. We're bringing you in, and we want to kind of celebrate your culture and what you bring to the table, and find forums and ways for you to share that in an authentic way. But also to have those offices to say, look, you're on the other side of home. Sometimes you're 17, 18 years old, and we have a lot of places you can go when something goes wrong that's unique to you. We want ways to support improvement of your English, if that's a specific thing that is an issue to you, and to be sure that you're fully aware of kind of all of life in the United States, because it's we are unlike any other place in the world. But I would say, just looking at the political environment, the realities amongst COVID-19, and then the realities around the global economy, if we could get back to where we were in fall of 2019 by fall 2022, to me, that would be a win. I know it means you have to make some other difficult decisions, but another thing to look at is you look out over the next 15, 20 years, even 10, 15 years, in this country, we've had some pretty major demographic shifts. And, starting 20, 30 years ago, those who were most in categories that were most likely to have children that would be college attenders, particularly for private universities, they started having less kids or not having kids. And so to kind of keep our programs where they need to be, we need to find customers from outside the United States. So there's always that pressure to increase international enrollment.
That's terrific. Okay, thanks for that. So just going back to audience questions and then shifting gears and going to more folks from the university side. There are questions about, this is less about sort of the administration, but more about the trends that you see. What trends do you see if you look at a trend basis last couple of years as far as international student flows? Which countries you see shifts in flows from different countries to the US or at least to RIT? And also, what types of programs are you seeing? Are you seeing sort of, what are some of the salient sort of trends that you're seeing, I guess, in terms of interest from different international, different foreign countries, but also different types of programs?
Sure, that's a great question. In terms of the countries, I'm looking kind of both at our data, but also looking at Open Doors, which is an organization that kind of oversees all international education. Those coming into the United States that are increasing. We're seeing increases from Kazakhstan. We're seeing increases from the UAE. We're seeing increases from Malaysia. A lot of the former Soviet republics. Right before we shut down, I was at an event in the Ukraine in Kiev, and I just couldn't believe how many students were there and how much interest there was. South America, I would say, particularly Brazil. It's especially there's a lot of things in terms of the exchange rate and their economy that still need to kind of be resolved, but I'd say there's demand from there. In terms of program, one of the things that we're seeing is it's not just to study, it's also to work. And it's interesting for me because I don't know the percentage breakdown. I'll say 50-50, but there's a significant number of prospective students for us who very early in the conversation, it's about work experiences. I want to study there and get the work experiences. So I know that's not a program per se, but that's a huge part of why they're coming. In terms of really popular programs for us, I would say our computing programs are all really popular. We have a brand new $30 million facility for computing security. So that's obviously a draw in a market where they really need skilled workers right now, really need qualified workers right now. Our engineering programs are very popular, our business programs. Kind of some of our smaller but really exceptional programs, our animation program is certainly very strong. From international students, particularly in the Pacific Rim, our College of Art and Designs is very, very, very popular. We see a lot of draws there. Actually, a lot of our students who were supposed to come this past fall are in our campus in Weihai, China, taking some of their perspective courses right now. And we actually, if you can believe it, we hired an extra professor, and actually just before I got on this podcast, a second professor for our Weihai campus to support our international students who were to start in Rochester in the fall and are now starting in China until they can get the visa to join us in our Rochester campus.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think I think we can sort of conclude here. I think this has been a really interesting discussion. It's been terrific getting your perspective, Paul, on all these different areas. It's been very valuable. And I think that the next years are going to be very, very interesting. I can say for myself, sort of more of a personal perspective, I've been living overseas for many years. And so I meet Americans and I live in Europe. And I think that I certainly hope that, and I think it's as what you're saying, it's bound to happen that we'll get the growth back. But I think, given the challenges that we're facing as a world, things like climate change and things like that really require global cooperation. I think it's great, no matter if students are going to the United States or the UK or Australia. It's just a wonderful thing for the world to have these flows of students going different places to help with mutual understanding. I think it facilitates better cultural understanding and facilitates just, I think it makes it easier for nations to cooperate. And I know, for example, schools that I went to, there are people that I went to school with many years ago that are in senior positions in governments around the world. And I think that education of being in the United States is definitely impacts their perspective. Anyway, thank you so much, Paul, for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for participating. And we really look forward to seeing all of you again next month.